Okay, so first of all, yes, I am wearing sunglasses. Not because the sun is out, not because I'm cool, because this is a very cool French movie and it just felt correct. This is exactly the vibe we're going for. So today I'd like to talk about Nouvelle Vague, directed by Richard Linklater. And this is going to be completely spoiler free. I'm not going to ruin anything. This video is just me talking about how the movie feels, what it's about on a surface level, and why I absolutely needed to talk about it. Because this film has been out for a while now. It's done its festival run and it just came out this past weekend in the UK, and after seeing it I just couldn't not talk about it. Alright, I need to take these sunglasses off because I genuinely can't see a thing. I hope it made for a good intro. Also, quick context, I went through hell and back to see this movie. I finished work, I caught 2 trains, I sprinted through a train station like I was in my own little French New Wave movie for 5 minutes, and honestly, worth it. Completely and utterly worth it. So, if you've never even heard of this film, here's a quick, very short setup. This is a film about the French New Wave classic Breathless. That's it. That's the core of it. The short version is this. After writing for the famous film magazine Cahiers du cinéma, I hope I said that right, a young Jean-Luc Godard decides the best form of film criticism is actually making films himself. He convinces a producer to fund a low-budget feature, works with fellow filmmaker François Truffaut on a rough story about a small-time gangster couple, and that project eventually becomes Breathless, one of the films that helped kick off the French New Wave. That's all you really need to know. This isn't a plot-heavy movie, this isn't a twisty movie, this is a movie about a moment in film history, and very specifically about a group of people who genuinely, honestly believed they were going to change film history forever. Now, before I get into it, I want to talk about my expectations going in. So, I love Richard Linklater. As a writer and director, I absolutely love the guy. I think he's one of those filmmakers even when one of his films doesn't fully click for me, I still really respect the voice behind it. I love how much he cares about conversation, about time, about people, about art. So when I heard he was making a movie about the French New Wave, and specifically about Godard, and even more specifically about the making of Breathless, that just sounded like the most Linklater-coded project imaginable. Like, of course he would make this, of course. And I actually had seen Breathless before seeing this. Which, by the way, I don't think is totally necessary. You don't need to see Breathless before watching this movie. If you have seen Breathless, it just works as extra context for this movie. But you can go in knowing absolutely nothing and you would do just fine. So with Breathless, I really admire it. I really respect it. I think it's extremely cool and it's insanely stylized. It's one of those movies where you can immediately see why it's got such a big following and why it's so loved and admired. But for me, it kind of lacks any sort of character or story to it. I just wish there was a bit more depth to the characters and the story, that's all. I was watching it more with my brain than my heart, if that makes sense. The editing in it goes insanely hard, like genuinely. The filmmaking in Breathless is genuinely incredible. But I wasn't emotionally obsessed like most people are with this movie. And honestly, watching Nouvelle Vague after that, it honestly makes just complete sense as to why I feel that way about its story and characters. And I'll get into that later. But yeah, going into this, my expectations were this. I love Linklater. This is a very cool concept. I love movies about making movies. But I was also a bit worried because this could end up being very self-indulgent, really pretentious, and kind of only made for people who live and breathe film history, which I do, but still, I don't want 50 million references just for the sake of references. So let's talk about what this actually is. More than anything, this movie is an ode to cinema. Like, that is genuinely the main thing. It's a love letter. It's a full-on, open, sincere love letter to movies. And honestly, for that reason alone, it's pretty hard not to love it. Linklater does not miss here. This film is just fantastic in every way. And I don't say that lightly. I absolutely adore movies that are about movies. I really, really do. It's genuinely one of my most favourite little subgenres in movies. And this feels like it's genuinely one of those essential films in that mini category now. It seriously earns its place. Because this isn't a movie just about production gone wrong, or egos clashing, or behind the scenes drama. It's about a moment where cinema itself was changing, and the film fully understands how radical that change was at the time. Because it's pretty undeniable how much the French New Wave revolutionized filmmaking. We talk about it all the time, we reference it constantly, we see its influences absolutely everywhere. But this film genuinely captures how different, unique, and somewhat jarring that moment in history actually was. It doesn't romanticize it into something neat and clean. It kind of lets it feel messy and strange and a bit uncomfortable, and I really loved that. One of the first things that actually struck me was how much passion was just coming off of this movie. Like, it radiates it. There is so much attention to detail in every single scene. Every person, every location, every interaction. This doesn't feel like a surface level recreation of historical events. It feels like it was made by someone who has lived and breathed these movies for so long, who has studied them down to their bare essentials, who loves them, and who understands the people behind them, which is really important because this film isn't about putting these icons and filmmakers on a pedestal. It doesn't turn them into saints. It doesn't turn them into superheroes. It shows them as artists, which means complicated, messy, egotistical, brilliant, annoying, inspiring, and I really appreciated that. I was really worried this would be just overly pretentious. I really was, because I mean, it's a black and white film about French filmmakers talking about cinema, philosophy, and art. Like, the ingredients are there. It's definitely possible. And look, it is pretentious. Let's not pretend it isn't. But at the same time, I didn't find it as much as I thought it would be. And I think the reason it works is because of what the film actually is. It would be kind of dishonest to make this movie and just try and sand all that off. This is about a group of people who were famously pretentious. And I don't mean that in a bad way. They were intense about film. They were serious about film. They genuinely believed cinema mattered deeply. And this movie fully embraces that, but it doesn't feel smug. It never feels like it's looking down on you. It feels like it's inviting you in, which is very important. And honestly, being Linklater, it could have honestly been way more indulgent than this. So I was pleasantly surprised by how grounded this actually was. Now, something I want to touch on quickly, because I have said this about Linklater in the past, and I think it's fair. While I love his writing, his dialogue in movies sometimes can very much feel like movie conversations. Not bad, just heightened, slightly too articulate, slightly too rhythmically perfect. And I was a bit worried about that here, because when you're dealing with real historical figures, and you're dealing with them in a docu-drama format, that kind of stylization can pull you out of it. But honestly, it's fairly minimal here, and I thought this was a genuinely great screenplay. It flowed very naturally, and more importantly, it felt like people were talking about things they genuinely cared about. Even when the dialogue gets a little more philosophical, it still feels rooted in real conversations, real debates, real frustrations, real excitement, and I think that balance is really hard to pull it off, but he does it really well here. Visually, this thing is absolutely gorgeous. And look, I know black and white can make anything look good. It just does. It's cheating a little bit. But this goes way beyond that. Linklater's directing here is seriously just beautiful. His choice of shots, the way he frames people in rooms, the way he uses streets and cafes and interiors, the way he lets scenes breathe, it's breathtaking. This film feels like a time capsule. It genuinely feels like you're stepping into that time and place, and it is so hard not to immediately be sucked into that. There's just something about the way this movie moves, the rhythm of it, the texture of it, the pacing of it, that makes it feel alive. Not staged, not recreated, just alive. And that brings me to one of my favourite things about this film. To me, this is exactly what a docudrama should look and feel like. It doesn't feel like it dodges any of the unlikable or slightly complicated aspects of Jean-Luc Godard, which I really appreciated. It doesn't try to soften him. It doesn't try to redeem him. It doesn't try to villainize him either. It just kind of presents him as he was, or at least as close as you can get. And that's what makes this film feel so authentic. Not once did it feel like the fictionalized telling of true events. You genuinely feel like you were in the moment with these people. You feel like you're in the room with them as these conversations are happening. You feel like you're watching something unfold rather than being told a story. And for this type of film, that is absolutely everything. There are also a ridiculous amount of film references in this, which for me was awesome. But what I really liked is they don't just feel shoehorned in. They just feel like the natural language of these people, which makes sense. These were critics. These were obsessive filmgoers. moviegoers. These were people who lived in cinemas. Of course, they're constantly comparing performances, directors, and camera angles. It would be kind of weird if they weren't. And again, it never feels like the movie is just flexing its knowledge for the sake of it. It feels like it's showing you how these people genuinely thought. There is something incredibly comforting about watching a movie made by someone who understands why we love movies so much. This feels like a movie made for people who have just fallen in love with cinema. And I don't mean that in a gatekeepy way, I mean it in a very sincere way. It understands the obsession, it understands the excitement, it understands that slightly embarrassing intensity you feel when you've discovered something that just rewrites your brain entirely. And that's really powerful. But I also don't think you need to be an expert on French New Wave to get something out of this. You don't need to get every reference that gets dropped. The emotional through line of the movie is very universal. It's about wanting to create, about wanting to say something that matters. It's about wanting to matter. And that is something that most people can relate to in some form. Now, very quickly, I do want to talk about the pacing, because I think this is something that could turn most people off. This isn't a fast movie, it's not trying to be. It moves at a very deliberate, very relaxed pace. Scenes linger, conversations breathe. There are scenes where you're simply just sitting in a space with these people, and I personally love that. But I can genuinely see someone kind of rejecting this as soon as they realise it's not as dramatic or fast as they hoped it would be, and being a little thrown by just how gentle it actually is. This is a hangout movie in the best way. It's very much a spend time with these people kind of movie, which, again, very on brand for Linklater. And honestly, by the time the film had ended, I just felt really happy, which sounds simple, but it's true. I felt inspired. I felt reminded of why I love movies so much. And that is such a lovely feeling to walk out of the cinema with, especially after dragging yourself over multiple train lines just to get there. Again, totally worth it. So yeah, to wrap this up, Nouvelle Vague is more than a behind-the-scenes look at a famous film. It's more than just a highly stylish black and white drama. It's an ode to cinema. It's a celebration of artistic risk. It's about a generation of filmmakers who genuinely believed they could change the medium. And if we're being honest, they kind of did. This is a genuinely beautiful, thoughtful, and deeply affectionate film. It's full of passion, it's full of detail, it's full of love for the craft, and it's made by someone who fully understands how important movies are. I loved it. I really, really did. It's so good. But yeah, man, those are just my thoughts. Again, I realise I am very late to this. I do apologise, but blame the UK release dates. But I'd love to know, what did you think of Nouvelle Vague? And I'd love to know as well, what's your favourite Richard Linklater movie? He has so many bangers, it's so hard to choose from, but if you have one, let me know down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Like, subscribe, and go watch some movies. I'll see you in the next one.